All right, so dear all, I would like to warmly welcome you to the first day of our conference, the title of which is Through Poeisis to Knowledge, the Poeisis of Knowledge. And it's my great pleasure to say that this event is co-organized with the partners of Constantine the Philosophy University. And it's my special pleasure to see here Professor Paul Jayakar from the American College, Madurai, India. And other co-organizers are Baji Mokhtar University, Annabelle Algeria, Sarashtra University, Rajkot, India, University of Mosul, Iraq, University of Yaoundé, Cameroon, and Department of Anglophone Studies, University of Antananarivo, Madagascar. Our keynote speaker for today is Professor Salih Albadrani from the University of Mosul in Iraq. And before he starts his talk, I would like to briefly introduce him. So Professor Salih has a PhD in contemporary English and American poetry from the University of Baghdad. He was a visiting scholar at Michigan State University in 2013. He has published several books on modern American poetry and several articles on ethnic and multicultural poetry. He has been teaching poetry for almost 20 years, different levels of students at various universities in Iraq, and he is currently an assistant professor and the head of the English department at the College of Arts, University of Mosul in Iraq. His today's talk will also focus on poetry, and I'm really looking forward to this because it seems to me that it will be about philosophy of poetry, about our reading practices of poetry, and how poetry can enrich our life. So, Professor Salih, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Maria. And before I start, I would like to thank you, thank Constantine Philosopher University in Slovakia for giving me this opportunity to address those esteemed guests and participants. We've been working for 3 years now on this program on poetry as lingua franca, and we have several experiences with multicultural participants, in fact, and we had a great time exchanging ideas and thoughts about poetry. So thank you very much for making this happen, Professor Maria, who's my friend and dear colleague from the University of Kentucky when we were together there. And we're looking forward for more cooperation, in fact. So my speech today, in fact, focuses on the concept of knowledge for Plato and how Plato views poetry and the poetic creation. So it would concentrate mostly on the philosophy and the fundamental things that Plato has studied like 2,000 and more years ago in his book, The Republic, and the other philosophers who has participated or trying to answer the questions raised by Plato, especially Aristotle and Longinus. And as you know, Plato is the greatest, in fact, the greatest Greek philosopher throughout history. And his views on knowledge, on other philosophical things, in fact, engaged philosophers throughout history. So they were busy trying to explain or to answer the questions raised by Plato. So I would begin by this presentation, which is entitled The Poetic Path to Wisdom, Unveiling the Platonic Vision of Knowledge. So as we embark on this intellectual journey, I invite you to join me in embracing the wisdom of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, whose ideas continue to illuminate our understanding of knowledge, reality, and the human condition. So in the realm of philosophy, Plato's legacy is unparalleled. His works, particularly The Republic, have shaped the trajectory of Western thought, influencing some of the most influential minds in history. At the heart of Plato's philosophy lies a poetic vision of knowledge, one that transcends the mundane and speaks to the very essence of human existence. In Plato's philosophical writings, the concept of poiesis plays a central role in his understanding of the creative process and nature of art and poetry. Poiesis is an ancient Greek word which refers to the act of making, creating, or producing. So for Plato, poiesis encompasses not just the physical creation of objects, but the mental and spiritual aspects of the creative act. Now, at the heart of Plato's theory of poiesis is his notion of forms or ideas. So Plato believed that behind the physical and sensory world we experience lies a realm of perfect eternal forms or archetypes. These forms represent the true essence or ideal version of all things, from a perfect circle to the perfect human being. So according to Plato, the material world we inhabit is merely an imperfect reflection or copy of these higher, truer forms. Now, just to clarify this idea, so Plato has an idea that behind this physical sensory world, there is another more abstract and metaphysical world, which lies somewhere above this world, the physical world. Now, in that world, which he calls the realm of the forms or ideals, he says that everything is set there in a perfect, independent form. So everything which we have in reality now has a perfect version in that world of forms. So in order to clarify this idea, Plato gives two allegories or two examples, which are very popular. The first one is that of the chair, and the second one is that of the cave. Sorry, anyone wanted to say something? Yes. Maria, is everything good, clear to you, my voice and everything?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
I would just kindly ask participants to mute themselves while we are listening to Professor Salih.
Okay. So I'll talk briefly about these two allegories. So Plato says behind, I think he gives two examples. The first one, which is the example of the allegory of the chair, and he says we have like hundreds of chairs in the world, but if we go back in history, before this chair was invented or was made by a carpenter, there was a man who was sitting and he was thinking of making something to sit on and to rest your back. And throughout his mental ability, he manages to access that world of forms in which the perfect image of the chair lies there, sorry. And then he started to imitate that form by copying it. Okay. So all the chairs, as said by Plato, are imitations or imperfect copies of that perfect version of the chair. This is the first allegory. The second one that he gave is the allegory of the cave. So to grasp his vision, Plato gives a powerful metaphor that illustrates the journey of the human soul towards the enlightenment. In this allegory, prisoners are chained in a cave. So just imagine we have a cave, and in that cave, there are prisoners. So the prisoners are facing a wall where shadows are projected. So in front of those prisoners, we have a wall, and on this wall is projected shadows. They believe the shadows to be reality, to be the reality that they know, unaware of the true world outside. So when a prisoner is freed and upon emerging from the cave, first of all, he's initially blinded by the light of the sun, and as his eyes adjust, he comes to understand the true nature of reality, recognizing that the shadows were mere reflections of higher truth. This allegory serves as a poignant reminder that our perceptions of reality are often limited and incomplete. We are prone to mistaking the shadows of our experiences for the substance truth. So Plato's poetic path to wisdom encourages us to venture beyond the confines of our mundane existence to seek the eternal and unchanging forms that underlie our fleeting experiences. In this view, the act of creation involves the artist or poet accessing this realm of forms and then attempting to manifest or imitate those ideals in their work. So if anyone wanted to be a poet, for example, he needs to find an access to that world of realm of ideals, to that realm of ideals. And then he should start to imitate the forms in that realm. The poet, for example, does not simply invent their poems from scratch, but rather seeks to channel the perfect form of poetry itself. Similarly, the painter, and in the same way, the painter or any other artist, he should imitate that realm of the forms which is perfect and permanent. The ability of the poet or the artist to access, delve deep into the world of knowledge or the realm of ideals, as Plato called it, remains a mystery, not only for Plato, but for the preceding Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Ningites. In their writings, they tried to investigate and scrutinize the poet's extraordinary ability to access this world and transform it to the common man in an excellent, eloquent, and uncompetitive manner. So Greek philosophers come up with the concept of inspiration as the logical reasoning of the poet's innate ability for creative writing. Now, as you know, poets throughout the history, throughout the world, in fact, they were considered as the seers, the people who foresees things that common people or common men are not able to see. And they have like this innate ability to see the truth and to express it in an excellent way. So poetry is not only a matter of content, but it's a matter of how to express that content. So we have form and content. So those poets were able to access to this realm of forms, bringing out bringing out those ideas, perfect ideas, and they have an innate ability to express those ideas with magnificent style that would impress everyone. So from the time of Plato and up to this moment, in fact, people are engaged in trying to investigate, trying to justify, trying to find reasons why some people have this extraordinary ability while so many others do not have this ability. So by the time of Plato, they come up with the concept of inspiration. And inspiration is sometimes taken from a positive point of view and sometimes it's taken from a negative point of view. In fact, but by the time of Plato, it was negatively oriented or negatively considered, as he believed that the poet is possessed by a kind of a superpower, a kind of a demonic power or divine power. And by being possessed, he's going to be only the mouthpiece. He's going to be only the speaker of that specific power. And he doesn't have any credit in saying or composing the masterpieces that he recites. So now we'll be talking about some types of inspiration or the philosophy of inspiration as a way of justifying the poet's ability to compose great poetry. So Plato saw this process of Poeisis as a type of divine inspiration or madness. He calls it madness. It is a state of being illogical, a state of being insane, a state of being possessed by a power, which he calls madness. So it is a temporary state of transcendence where the artist is possessed by the muse and granted access to the eternal forms. In his dialogue, Plato has Socrates described the poet as a light and winged and holy thing who is incapable of inventing until he has been inspired and is out of his senses and reason is no longer in him. Also, in the realm of poetic knowledge for Plato is the two worlds or the two concepts of the world, which he calls the world of being, which refers to the realm of forms that I was talking about, and the world of becoming, which refers to the imitations, to the reality that is an imperfect copy of uh, of the world of forms. Now, let me skip that and go further into talking about the concept of inspiration for Plato, for Aristotle, and for other philosophers. So, again, Plato's concept of inspiration is deeply intertwined with his views on creativity, knowledge, and the divine. So, for Plato, true inspiration is not merely the result of a human effort or skill, but a form of divine influence that transcends rational understanding. So he saw inspiration as a kind of madness, divine madness, as I said previously, where individuals are touched by the gods, allowing them to perceive higher truths. This idea is particularly prominent in his dialogues, especially Ion and Phaedrus, where he explores the nature of artistic and philosophical inspiration. So we have different kinds of inspiration. The inspiration as divine madness. So in Phaedrus, Plato identifies four kinds of divine madness, each associated with a different god and type of inspiration. So we have a prophetic madness inspired by Apollo. We have poetic madness inspired by the muses. We have erotic madness inspired by Eros, and we have ritual madness inspired by Dionysus. Each form of madness represents a different way in which the human soul is moved by the divine toward higher realities. The second type is the role of the muses in helping the poets compose their poetry. So the muses play a central role in Plato's concept of inspiration. For Plato, the muses are the source of all artistic creativity, and their influence allows the poet or artist to access truths beyond the physical world. The poet, inspired by the muses, transcends the limitation of reason and perception and is able to channel something greater than themselves, an expression of the eternal truths that exist in the world of forms. And this way, inspiration is not just a creative act, but a kind of revelation. So as if here, the poets are endowed with a kind of a prophetic ability, and they are able to reveal, just like, the revelations for prophets and messengers of God. And I'll be referring throughout this speech to some Arabic poets and Arabic heritage. In fact, we have one of the greatest poets in the Arab world who's called Al-Mutanabbi, which literally means the prophet. يعني as if this man has a real revelation or has a real connection to God. In fact, he's the best. He's one of the greatest Arab poets. Inspiration, the second inspiration is that of knowledge. So Plato's views of inspiration also aligns with his broader theory of knowledge. In his epistemology, true knowledge comes not from empirical observation, but from grasping the eternal forms through the intellect. So inspiration in this context is a way of accessing knowledge that is beyond ordinary human understanding. While philosophers seek this knowledge through reason, Plato suggests that poets and artists receive glimpses of these truths through the divine madness. Again, in his book, in Phaedrus, Plato argues that love or erotic madness, as he describes it, can inspire a similar ascent to the world of the forms, with the lover being inspired by the beauty of the beloved to seek a higher, more spiritual beauty. Now, we have some criticism against inspiration in art. So, while Plato acknowledges the divine origin of artistic inspiration, he also expresses skepticism about its value. In his book, The Republic, he famously critiques poetry and the arts, arguing that they can mislead people away from the truth, since poets are inspired by the muses rather than by reason. And because Plato is a philosopher, so he resorts more to reason than uh, than other things, imagination, other things. So their works are based on emotions and illusions rather than on the forms. Plato feared that such inspired creations could corrupt the soul, as they appeal to the irrational parts of human nature rather than to reason. So for Plato, philosophy grounded in rational inquiry was a superior path to truth, even though he recognized the power and appeal of artistic inspiration. So these were the views of the Greek philosophers on inspiration and their attempts to justify or to try to understand the poet's ability at composing poetry. In Arabic literature and heritage, philosophers and thinkers were also busy trying to investigate the poet's creative ability to access the world of knowledge as described by Plato. They ascribed this ability to a certain external power. So they agreed with the Greeks that the poet is being helped or possessed by a superpower, and this is not his independent creative production. So this external power, like that of the muses, but since Arab philosophers did not believe in the existence of the muses, this is first thing, or probably they even didn't believe, or even they didn't know about them, and in that time, they come up with a similar justification. So the Arab philosophers believe that every poet is possessed by a demonic power. So instead of we having a muse, so that poet is having a demonic power, which enables him to compose and recite poetry. And that without the help of the demons, the poet wouldn't be able to write a line of verse. These demons are called the poet's demons. And this is one of the most popular the poet's demons. And this is one of the most popular justification for this creative ability. Another interesting thing about explaining this creativity or this ability to compose poetry is in the Arab Peninsula, there is a valley uh, which is located now in Saudi Arabia. That valley is called the Valley of Abqar. So it is called Abqar. as the narrative or as the story tells us, in that valley, like thousands of demons are living there. So it is a valley which is full of demons and genies and all kinds of these supernatural creatures. So anyone, if he wants to be a poet, if he wants to be like a creative writer, he should go to that valley and spend like 14 days, fortnight. Like he would stay there day and night for 14 days. If he come back like safe and sound without losing his, his mind, without being insane, he would be genius. The Arabic word for genius is abqari. Just like Iraqi. So this valley is abqar, and the man who survived the 14 days of the valley is called abqari, which is the Arabic word for being genius. So again, in this classification and this justification, we see that the philosophers, they resort to like some demonic power, some divine power that would help the poets in creating or in composing their poetry. Even the word genius, the English word genius, is sometimes connected with genie. Again, these demonic uh, supernatural creatures. Now, these are the things that Plato was trying to say or to investigate about about the ability of the poets to compose poetry. Aristotle, after him, again he continues the concepts of Plato, and he has his own views on inspiration. And in fact, Aristotle views inspiration from a positive point of view, as if it is a great privilege to poets to have such connections with the gods. So they are not common human beings, but they are special human beings who have their own connection with the gods. Longinus, who comes after them, or who came after them, he's the student of Aristotle. He also wanted to investigate this ability, and he wanted to study thoroughly uh, the effect of poetry on human life. So, how poetry can help people to develop, how poetry can help people to be elevated. So he comes up with the concept of the sublime. The sublime for Longinus is what is a piece of writing, of fiction, of narrative, of poetry. That piece of creative writing has the ability to transform the reader spiritually and rationally into a different higher level. And he, in fact, insisted on this transformation, the transformation effect of a certain pieces of creative writing. And I think this is the gist of poetry, of the effect of poetry on people's life. So if a poet can manage to transform the readers spiritually to different realms, like higher levels of realization, that is a master poet, that is an excellent poet. So I would read some of the concept about the sublime, Longinus's concept of the sublime. So Longinus, as being a Greek philosopher and rhetorician, is best known for his treatise on the sublime, a seminal work on aesthetics that examines the nature of elevated, awe-inspiring expressions in literature. Written in the first century, on the sublime explores how great writing can evoke overwhelming emotions and create a sense of grandeur that transcends ordinary experience. Longinus' concept of the sublime focuses on the ability of language and thought to elevate the soul, producing not just admiration, but a deep emotional and intellectual response. For Longinus, the sublime is a quality in literature that strikes the reader with a sense of greatness, power, and wonder. It is not simply about rhetorical skill or technical precision. Rather, it involves a profound emotional impact that transcends the limitations of ordinary discourse. Sublime works, according to Longinus, have the capacity to transport the reader beyond the mundane into a realm of elevated thought and feeling. This impact is not confined to the intellect, but moves the entire soul, filling it with awe, wonder, and sometimes even terror. Longinus emphasized that the sublime is not limited to grandiose or bombastic language, but can be found in simplicity and clarity when used with genuine passion and insight. The power of the sublime lies in its ability to evoke a deep emotional resonance that overwhelms the audience, often making them feel as if they have encountered something greater than themselves. In fact, he gives like five sources to the sublime and how a specific piece of poetry, a specific piece of fiction might be considered as a sublime or a masterpiece. So, grandeur of thought, he says that any work of art, in order to be great, the content, the idea, the topic should be great or grandeur. Then the strong emotion is the second one. And then the use of effective figures of speech or poetic language. Because poetry is different from prose, it has this musicality, it has this emotional touch on human beings. And probably this is why we memorize poetry and we recite it, throughout our everyday life because of this musicality. The second one is the effective use of figures of speech and noble diction, and finally, dignified and elevated composition. So, to conclude, Platonic poesis, which refers to the act of creation or production, particularly in the realm of art, occupies a nuanced and often critical position in Plato's philosophy. Rooted in his broader metaphysical framework, Plato's view of artistic creation is deeply connected to his theory of forms and his skepticism about the reliability of sensory experience. From the Platonic perspective, poesis, especially artistic production, is a form of imitation or mimesis, which means that art does not engage with the true reality, but rather with shadows or reflections of it. For Plato, the physical world itself is already a copy of the perfect and unchanging forms and art. Being a copy of this copy is twice removed from the truth. That leads Plato to argue that poetry, painting, and other arts are uh, uh, misleading and can potentially distract people from the pursuit of genuine knowledge and wisdom. However, the act of poesis is not entirely negative in Plato's thought. In dialogues like the Aeon and Phaedrus, Plato acknowledges that artistic creation can be inspired by divine influence or what he calls divine madness. So here poesis takes on a more positive connotation as it allows the artist to access, however imperfectly, something beyond the mundane, an insight into higher realities or truths. Yet even this inspiration remains incomplete when compared to the philosopher's rational pursuit of the forms. So, in short, um, philosophers from the time of Plato onward, and I think until the present time, are engaged in trying to understand the ability of certain people who are called poets or creative writers to compose poetry in that excellent way. Yani, why some people are endowed with this innate ability and others do not have such kind of ability. So sometimes they resort to logical reason or justifications, and sometimes they connect them with divine or demonic powers that possess the poets or those people and turn them into speakers or mouthpieces of those people. And I think in Greek, in England, in the Arab world, the justifications are similar. Yani, those people should have their own connections with a superpower which endows them with this ability. And I think also poets who try to popularize this notion that they are not ordinary people. I think this is everything for my speech talking about the Platonic poesies. I hope I was not so long and boring for you, but I tried to give you my ideas, to summarize Plato's ideas about this creative art. We are talking about philosophy here, and about the art of creating poetry. So thank you very much for being here with me today. Thank you, Professor Maria Hrikova, for giving me the honor, in fact, to be here with you, to be here addressing you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for this very insightful, interesting talk. I think it's wonderful that we started with poetry and with Plato, who is still so influential and who had such a great impact on the development of poetry, on writers, philosophers of all sorts. So we have some 10 minutes for discussion. So if there are some questions, please feel free to raise your hand or to speak openly. If not, I will start with my first question. Now, what you have introduced is can be for students quite abstract. Like this is ancient theory, Plato, who lived a long time ago.
Yeah.
So my question would be, do you teach this to your students? Is it some compulsory part of your course, this philosophical background into poetry? And if yes, how do they respond to it?
Well, thank you, Maria, for raising this issue. In fact, we teach it as part of literary criticism because this is, the art of creating, composing poetry, etc., is part of criticism. So I teach this to fourth-year students. Of course, I do not delve deeper into the philosophy because they are only senior students, and they would have difficulty because this is highly philosophical. But we teach them about the world of forms and reality and how reality is only shadows of that world of form. It is completely abstract, right? But because Plato is a philosopher, so he resorts to reason and rationality more than to emotions. So that world of forms is composed only for philosophers. Now, when some poets, some people, show up writing those great masterpieces, so he starts to wonder about their own ability at accessing that realm of the forms. Okay, so he starts, by justifying these, finding ways of any kind of possible connections for those who are not philosophers. And he comes up with, the muses and inspiration and other things. We also teach our MA students a complete course on criticism, and Plato and Aristotle and Johannes is part of that course. Because I think we should, give them the fundamentals, the basics of the ideas of philosophers and critics. Then we move on to modern criticism and to, the modern movements and theories of criticism. So our students are having difficulty, but we are there to help them understand what's going on. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I will have one more question. You mentioned that Plato's ideas lead to the concept of poets as being not ordinary people. Like there is this divine inspiration, we may say, or it's very closely connected to spirituality and some spiritual insight. What's the situation like in if you're familiar with it in contemporary Iraqi poetry? Do poets perceive themselves as being somewhat special to have this maybe prophetic power or different abilities than other people?
Well, let me talk about the Arabic poetry and the Arabic tradition. We, in fact, highly elevate poets, and they are not ordinary people. And I gave you an example of that one who was called the prophet. In Arabic, it is al-Mutanabbi because, so he was known until now. Like if you Google it, you will see he's the prophet al-Mutanabbi. So he's one of the greatest, in fact, poets. Um, so from the time of the pre-Islamic period, people were talking about this innate ability, this kind of creative writing. And as I said, I think throughout my speech, the poets themselves, supported this idea and tried to popularize that they have their own connections with these superpowers. And because we don't have in our, heritage, the muses, we have demons. So we have this concept of the demons or the poet's demons. So every poet has his own demon, just like the muses. Every poet has his own muse. As for contemporary Iraqi poetry, yes, we still highly elevate the poets because, sometimes when we have like social gatherings, we have poets reciting poetry. If we have any kind of other occasion, we have poets, reciting their poetry. They are not ordinary people. Although now they don't associate themselves with these, divine powers or supernatural powers, but they are still now, highly elevated. And we do not consider them as ordinary people. I myself try to write poetry, but it needs, Maria, it needs this gift, this talent, this endowed ability by God. So it's not only knowing the rules, knowing the versification, or having a good topic, but it is a matter of this ability. Some of our poets here, they do not spend time to compose poetry, but the idea or the topic, just the poem, just come to them in the moment of speaking. So they immediately recite their poems. So I couldn't, compose a line of verse, although I love and I know all the rules. Yeah, but it needs this. So it's very difficult, in fact, to justify this ability. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question in the chat. Thank you, Maria Alsbeta, for your question. So she asks, I would like to ask you, do you think that Plato's theory of cave can be reflected in some aspects in today's time? Now that we have many resources to make our own opinions, do we still need some unknown do we still, for some unknown reason, choose to sit in a cave and not use our own mind? So, how would you
It
respond to
is,
that?
well, Professor Maria, it is an allegory, because as you said, this is a highly abstract notion, the realm of the forms or the world of the perfect ideas, and how he was comparing it to reality, the physical reality as we see it. So it was even difficult for people of this time. So sometimes we resort to make things easier to grasp by people, to give them examples and allegory, to show them, in a way or another, how things work on. Now, of course, that was the idea of Plato, okay, which is located somewhere above this world, right? being in heaven, in God's, whatever, but it is above this world. And I think the justification for the present time is the world of imagination, because the world of imagination may correspond to the world of forms of Plato, right? And from where those poets and writers and creative, authors bring all of these great ideas from the world of imagination. Some people have great imagination, rich imagination that they can use it and to as a source for writing their narratives or poems. Of course, now we don't believe in that realms, the realm of the perfect ideas, but we have other justifications. But um, do not think that because we are living in the 21st century, that people stop believing in the supernatural powers or in these abstract worlds or realms. People until now believe in these supernatural powers. And if you, as a person, do not believe in that, then go on and see the cultures and literature, and you will see that people still believe in these things. Because this is the unknown resource, right, for writing poetry and composing. Yes, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answers, for your wonderful contribution to this conference. So I think we will conclude this first presentation, our keynote speech. So I would like to thank you again for your willingness to be the first to speak. Yeah, and Maria Alfbeta answered that she thanks you a lot for your wise words. So thank you a lot. And
You're
if it's
most
okay,
welcome, Maria. Yeah, it's okay. You're most welcome, Maria. As I said, it's an honor to be here with you
thank you.
today to address this esteemed and highly respected participants and audience. So thank you for making this happen.
Thank you so much.